The SAS would get a pivotal role in the fight against Al-Qaeda in Iraq. A Squadron, fresh in, replacing G, Special Forces operators were living vampire hours.
All right, lads, check your corners. Stairs clear.
The blades had swiftly reversed, or came bouncing down the stairs. Al-Zarqawi waged war against the American-led coalition forces. Mission Support Station MSS Fernandez, a trio of properties occupied by the SAS, Delta Force, and the infamous 75th Ranger Regiment. Killed by her kidnappers, Norman Camber's fate appeared to have been sealed. The scene was set for a competition with Delta Force, which also had its B Squadron in Baghdad at the time. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 created a power vacuum, contested by opposing factions whose power struggle soon escalated into brutal violence and terror, which would claim at least 200,000 lives in the decade that followed. The belligerents included Ba'athist irregulars, consisting of former members of Saddam's regime. Military and security services augmented by former Republican guards. They were mostly Sunni Muslims. Their power was on the decline since the fall of Saddam, and their leadership was ruthlessly hunted down by coalition special forces using the infamous deck of cards. Belligerents Group 2, jihadist organizations operating from Anbar province. Most notable among them were the al-Tawhid wa al-Jihad, led by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a veteran of the Afghan war against the Soviets, who would soon pledge allegiance to Osama bin Laden, transforming his group into Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They were also Sunni Muslims. The majority of the Iraqi population were Shia Muslims. Long oppressed under Saddam's Sunni rule, were initially sympathetic to the coalition forces, their liberators. Their willingness to cooperate, strength in numbers, and the fact that the old Sunni leadership was removed by coalition forces meant they soon made up a majority of Iraq's new security forces. It soon emerged that they harbored deep-seated animosity towards their former Sunni Muslim oppressors, and before long, elements of the new security forces were accused of being Shia death squads, which fueled the country's growing instability. Belligerent Group 3, the Mahdi Army, led by Muqtada al-Sadr, an influential Iraqi Shia Muslim cleric. In 2003, they originally acted as militia protectors of the Shia community, but by 2005, elements within this militia morphed into criminal gangs kidnapping for ransom. Belligerent Group 4. In the middle of these factions were the coalition forces, a multinational contingent striving to maintain order. Within their ranks were a number of elite special operations units, including the British Special Air Service, SAS. The SAS was based in Mission Support Station MSS Fernandez, a trio of properties occupied by the SAS, Delta Force, and the US Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, acting in support of the Special Forces operators as Task Force Center Green. They were located near Baghdad International Airport, where heavy stores were kept ready for rapid deployment. Initially, the SAS played a crucial role in intelligence gathering for MI6, the Secret Intelligence Services, the search for weapons of mass destruction, and the high-value target HVT hunting of senior Ba'athists identified with their deck of cards. They gathered a group of Iraqi informants, codenamed the Apostles, locals who could blend into the streets discreetly and deploy on missions with the SAS. Here I want to take a moment to reference the main source for this video, which is Mark Urban's excellent book, Task Force Black. Special forces continued to round up former Baathists. Saddam's sons Uday and Qusay were killed in July 2003. The removal of the old, largely secular leadership inadvertently created a power vacuum, one swiftly filled by the rising tide of Islamic militancy, fueled by an influx of foreign fighters inspired by the events of 9/11 and the rhetoric of Osama bin Laden. Mujahideen from across the Middle East waged war against the American-led forces. In October, the SAS initiated Op Paradoxical. Its purpose was to target threats to the coalition. A Squadron, fresh in, replacing G.
Right, lads, let's get this kit loaded.
And D Squadron formed TF-14 alongside Delta Force. Major Williams was a highly respected SAS officer who'd earned the Military Cross in southern Afghanistan, leading an assault on the Taliban from the front. The western districts of Baghdad, predominantly Sunni, became a hotbed of insurgent activity. Attacks on coalition forces escalated rapidly, reaching 10 to 15 incidents a day across Iraq by November. Shootings, mortar fire, and car bombs. The violence was not confined to coalition forces. Attacks on this year's civilians became increasingly frequent. A particularly devastating attack killed Ayatollah Muhammad Baghdad Hakim, a senior Shia cleric, alongside 90 civilians at the Shia spiritual center of Najaf, perpetrated by a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, a V-bead, driven by a suicide bomber. General Stanley McChrystal was in charge of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, the Tier 1 classified force. His previous role had been battalion commander in the infamous 75th Ranger Regiment. His leadership earned him a formidable reputation. The Rangers in the American Army are often compared to the paras in the British Army, the attack dogs. McChrystal's philosophy on the evolving conflict was, you've got to build a network to defeat a network. Al-Zarqawi was a formidable adversary, a Jordanian. Hardened by a tough upbringing and experienced in the Afghan war, he had honed his skills and ideology in Al-Qaeda training camps. Following the American invasion of Afghanistan, he had established a foothold in northern Iraq, aligning himself with Ansar al-Islam and rapidly rising to a position of leadership, attracting a growing cadre of loyal followers. By now he was firmly on the radar of the CIA and SIS, MI6, also known as the Zarqawi Group, or by their chosen name, Al-Tawhid wa al-Jihad. Zarqawi understood the power of propaganda. He recognized that reputation and sensationalism counted for a lot on Arab streets. Young volunteers and wealthy donors gravitated towards those whose names they knew. In May of 2004, Zarqawi demonstrated his brutal effectiveness by personally slaughtering Nick Berg and releasing the horrific footage to the world. A calculated act of terror designed to establish his network and instill fear. In October 2004, his organization formally pledged allegiance to Osama bin Laden, solidifying their place within the global jihadist movement. They officially became known as Al-Qaeda in the Land of the Two Rivers, or AQI, with Zarqawi as its undisputed leader. Because of the lessons learned during the troubles in Northern Ireland, the SAS possessed a distinct advantage in surveillance and the deployment of covert camera systems. Their operational doctrine was simple and effective. Find, fix, finish. Locate the target, establish their precise position, and then execute the capture. Working in close collaboration with the CIA, now numbering some 450 personnel across Baghdad, Basra, and the Kurdish north, alongside 50 British SIS operatives, some of whom were superior specialist Arabists, and 90 members of the US Army's Special Counterintelligence Detachment, SCID, training Iraqi spies, the intelligence network was expanding. Focus shifted fully to jihadist resistance groups. By the summer of 2004, Fallujah operated as a liberated zone for such groups. Operation Phantom Fury on Fallujah involved 20,000 US and Iraqi troops. Predator coverage of Fallujah informed the bombardments, also looking for apparent signs of Zarqawi's presence. There was limited to no UK involvement. The Abu Ghraib prison scandal had just broken in April of 2004, and UK involvement was under intense political scrutiny at that time. The one instance of UK involvement in the Battle of Fallujah was the Black Watch, which was sent in to relieve a US unit. They were targeted by Sunni insurgents, sadly losing 5 men in their first fortnight of heavy fighting. Meanwhile, the US lost 51 soldiers. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was not among the jihadists dead. He'd moved to an area south of Baghdad before the assault commenced. Captives taken by British special forces went into white detainee systems rather than black centres, which meant the US didn't want British SF to help in the pursuit of intel for al-Zarqawi because they wanted to apply enhanced interrogation techniques, which the Brits were not allowed to engage in. On the 28th of February 2005, US Special Forces, acting on intelligence, landed on a desert road in Anbar province. They had reason to believe the jihadist leader was travelling from Ramadi towards Fallujah. A car thought to contain Zarqawi and a couple of bodyguards saw the American roadblock and ran straight through it. The machine gunner, however, did not feel within his rights under the rules of engagement to open fire. The JSOC team had the support of a Predator UAV, and officers in Balad were watching the suspect car speeding along the desert road on the live feed. The image of the screen suddenly started to spin madly.
Control, we've lost visual. The camera is completely bugged out.
The aircraft had developed a technical fault, and the mounted camera was gyrating out of control. The opportunity had been lost. One of several in which the intelligence experts believed that they had been close but had missed their man. The SAS had its own brush with Zarqawi early in 2004 when it assaulted a house in Baghdad after forcing an entry.
All right, lads, check your corners.
Stairs clear.
The blades had swiftly reversed, piling out when an artillery shell attached to a detonating cord came bouncing down the stairs, and the occupants of the building were captured. Intelligence revealed that Zarqawi had left a short time before. Early in 2005, the SAS supplemented their lightly protected Snatch, thin-skins Land Rovers with armour-plated Humvees. The helicopter fleet was changing too, losing its pair of Chinooks and gaining more Pumas. Intelligence was boosted by establishing specialist teams in the task force. Cut off from the intelligence flow but from JSOC's blacklist of targets, that is Zarqawi and the AQI leadership, the British Human Intelligence, provided most of the initial leads for the British Task Force Black's raids in the latter part of 2004. Those taken in Task Force Black raids were handed over to the regular US Army units, white sites as opposed to black sites. On January 13, 2005, an RAF Hercules...
Sir, look at this. Hilton 2 just disappeared off the radar. What was its flight path? Headed for Balad, sir.
Get me JSOC.
An Iraqi group swiftly claimed responsibility for shooting down the airframe, in which 9 British servicemen were killed. This was a tremendous blow for G Squadron, who had just started their tour of duty in Baghdad, and for the rest of Task Force Black. Its members responded by tracking down the killers. A long intelligence operation led to raids later that year, which captured some of those responsible. The coalition was getting better and better at its job. Coalition telephone tip lines were a British innovation in Iraq, based on long experience in Northern Ireland. An Iraqi caller gave information pinpointing the whereabouts of Fadil Ibrahim al-Masdani, formerly a senior regional official in the Ba'athist Party. He was not one of the top Ba'athists in the deck of cards, but even so, there was a $200,000 price on Masdani's head because of the role he was believed to play in the resistance. Task Force Black surveillance experts using helicopters and other technical surveillance fixed Masdani's location at a farm to the northeast of the capital. On April 11, 2005, the SAS went in.
Target detained.
And lifted their man with a set-piece house assault. Masdani, an educated and once privileged man, chatted freely with his British captors. He couldn't fathom why the coalition was still going after people like him. Didn't they understand that the real threat came from the jihadists who had flooded into Iraq? April 2005 had started with a complex assault on Abu Ghraib prison involving machine guns, mortars and toque bombs.
Troops in contact, requesting reinforcements at detention facility.
The Americans reckoned that dozens of insurgents had been involved in a well-coordinated operation which wounded 44 of their soldiers as well as 12 prisoners. 11 days later, insurgents mounted a sustained attack on a marine base near the Syrian border at al-Husabaya. Up to 100 men attacked the Marines, launching 3 vehicle suicide attacks, including using a fire engine and a dump truck rigged with huge amounts of explosive, calling in airstrikes and helicopters to beat off the attack.
G, take it out!
The Americans had killed around 36 insurgents. The operation was attributed to Al-Qaeda. On April 29th, the movement had staged 14 attacks in a single day, most of them in Baghdad. Force Commander General Casey was so disturbed by the capabilities shown in these attacks that he formally upgraded Zarqawi's organization to the coalition's principal enemy in Iraq. During the summer of 2005, JSOC mounted dozens of takedowns against suspected local players or middle managers in the guerrilla organization. These actions exposed McChrystal's men to determined, heavily armed opposition that often would stand and fight rather than retreating in classic guerrilla fashion. By this time, the main operation run by the CO of Delta Force was dubbed Task Force 145. SAS, SBS, and the new Special Reconnaissance Regiment, SRR, along with the 2 Territorial Army SAS regiments and a Special Forces Signals Regiment, all came under the direction of the Director of Special Forces. In addition, a battalion of paratroopers was also being placed under his command.
Get squared away, lads. Meet me at the cookhouse at 1400.
Having been re-rolled to become SFSG, the Special Forces Support Group. In the summer of 2005, 6 Delta operators had been killed in 3 months. Many others had been badly wounded. September of 2005, further north, violence was stepping up relentlessly, with Sunni and Shia murdering one another in growing numbers. In mid-January of 2006, the SAS began Op Traction, its secret upgrade into the world of JSOC. Under Traction, the SAS deployed Task Group Headquarters, TGHQ, to Balad, where it could be joined at the hip with the American effort. Through this, the British gained the ability to channel far more intelligence to their strike force, now named Task Force Night, raising the pace of their operation. McChrystal was delighted at the British boosting their involvement to an industrial scale. The SAS would get what they had wanted for months, a pivotal role in the fight against Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI. JSOC's arch enemy was taking initiatives of its own. At the same time as the SAS launched Op Traction, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the Al-Qaeda leader, was recasting his own command. A jihadist website carried news on January 15th that 6 Sunni resistance groups had formed the Mujahideen Shura Council.
نحن هنا اليوم لنقرر مصيرنا. هذا قرار تاريخي يتطلب منا الحكمة والشجاعة.
Cells that embraced the Salafist ideology of AQI. The US now put a 25 million bounty on al-Zarqawi's head, as well as referring to him constantly, effectively turning him into the central figure in the movement. The 4 special ops units of Balad, West, Central, North and the UK's Knights in Baghdad were joined by a 5th, designated Task Force East.
Yo, Denver, good to see you, brother.
I bet Elaine's happy you're gone. She can get back to pounding Ted all day.
You know it.
On February 22nd, 2006, Samarra, a city 65 miles north of Baghdad, a predominantly Sunni city, several men dressed in military uniforms entered a sacred Shia al-Askari shrine, the Golden Mosque, one of the holiest sites in Shia Islam dating back to the 10th century, tied up the guards and planted explosives. At 6:44 a.m, in the lull between dawn prayers and the city reaching the peak of its morning rush, explosions followed, resulting in the collapse of the shrine's golden dome and damage to a significant portion of the structure. Detainee confessions would establish that AQI operatives had conducted the assault. The bombing ignited widespread retaliatory violence between Sunni and Shia Muslims. Within days, over 1,000 deaths were reported. The Samarra bombing triggered the Iraqi civil war. Iraq's fledgling security forces appeared to be part of the problem. Sunni complaints portrayed them as Shia death squads. On the morning of Friday, March 10, 2006, people in Dahwoodi could make out something by the railway line.
يا إلهي ماذا حدث هنا؟ اطلب الشرطة اطلب الشرطة الآن.
Although the man was dressed in an Arab dish dash, he was a Westerner. His hands were tied, cuts and bruises were visible on his head and body. He had been tortured before being shot. The body was that of Tom Fox, an American Quaker peace activist affiliated with the Christian peacemaker teams in Iraq. 3 other members, Norman Kember from the UK and Canadians James Loney and Harmeet Singh Sudhan, were kidnapped in Baghdad. A previously unknown group calling themselves the Swords of Righteousness Brigade claimed responsibility. By this time, around 200 foreigners had been kidnapped in Iraq, and most had been released upon payment of ransoms. But if your prize was American or British, the greatest return would come from selling them on to extremists. For British hostages, with the British government's refusal to pay ransom, the chances of survival were bleak. Ken Bigley had been beheaded on videotape the previous year. Margaret Hassan, a British aid worker, struggling for years to alleviate poverty in the country, was killed by her kidnappers with a couple of shots to the head. Norman Kember's fate appeared to have been sealed. Some clues emerged through hostage videos and websites which suggested that the Swords of Righteousness Brigade that posted the videos was not part of the Zarqawi-sponsored Mujahideen Shura Council of Jihadist parties. Time was running out for Task Force Night. By March 2006, under pressure, it launched Operation Lightwater. The infamous B Squadron was on operations almost every night, fighting patrols to produce intelligence. During Operation Lightwater, 50 buildings were raided. British Task Force Night conducted 44 door-kicking operations. The remainder were done by other coalition operators. 47 people were detained. An unknown number were killed. During the raid, suspects would be questioned, phones or computers seized. It had also become clear, as TF Night's operations are intensified, that what they termed as tactical questioning, interrogating the man who had just been arrested, quickly on the spot or nearby, had the greatest chance of yielding results. The shock of capture made it important to exploit that moment.
We know who you are. Tell us where the rest of your cell is.
On March 23, 2006, the SAS launched Operation A3, They targeted a house in Mishhada, northwest of Baghdad. SAS found two men. Abu Layth clearly knew something about the kidnappers. Under pressure, Abu Layth began to talk. He knew where Norman Kember and the two Canadians were being held. The SAS moved to the house, and when they were in position, the hostage takers were phoned with a warning. How about you disappear and we won't come after you? Just before 8 AM, a ground assault force from SAS Bsqn hit a house in western Baghdad. Kember looks bewildered. After 118 days of captivity, the 74-year-old hostage was close to death. But the application of cutting-edge intelligence techniques and a relentless Special Forces operation tempo had prevented his death. B Squadron was the first of the SAS squadrons to achieve an op-tempo similar to what Lieutenant General McChrystal demanded from US units in JSOC. The scene was set for an intense but highly professional competition with Delta Force, their neighbours from MSS Fernandez, which also had its B Squadron in Baghdad at the time by sheer coincidence. Lieutenant General McChrystal allowed team leaders in both squadrons to develop their own plans, pitching for targets. A few weeks after the hostages were freed, the British played host to McChrystal and several other senior US officers at their base near Hereford. McChrystal and his British host, Shaw, who had been a platoon commander in the Falklands War many years before, was now Director of Special Forces.
Welcome to Credden Hill, gentlemen.
General, it's an honor to finally meet you in person.
During General McChrystal's visit, there were briefings and conversations. Concerns about Abu Ghraib prison had now been smoothed over, and the British got a license to go head-to-head with the Americans. In the spring of 2006, the British military were deploying more than 4,000 troops to southern Afghanistan. Under Shaw's rebalancing of special forces, the Special Boat Service was taking the lead in supporting this new deployment. UK Special Forces were only provided with enablers to support one squadron on operations at a time, so support was thinly stretched. Task Force Knight's integration into the JSOC Iraq campaign came at just the right time for the British commanders. Soon after, the SAS demonstrated its usefulness to the Americans in the most dramatic way. On the night in April 2006, RAF Pumas had come in from Baghdad International Airport.
30 minutes.
Steve!
Men formed up fresh from their quick battle orders. Up LARCHWOOD 4. The Alpha was a farmhouse on the outskirts of Jusufia. 25 kilometers to the southwest of Baghdad, was seething with tension at the time. Fallujah was about 20 kilometers off to the west, an area of intense insurgent activity known as the Triangle of Death. By 2006, it was an extremely dangerous area for coalition forces. The target package worked up by one of the B Squadron team leaders, an SAS captain, on the night of April 16th, featured one Abu Atiyah. He was typical of the mid-level Al-Qaeda leadership being targeted by JSOC at the time. Abu Atiyah had a role in setting up VBEDs, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. One of the team leaders would lead the assault force of 4 teams. They would split into 2 groups. SAS snipers would be orbiting in Lynx helicopters inside the Alpha. 2 members of the Apostles, the SAS Iraqi helpers, would interpret and assist SSE, sensitive site exploitation. The B Squadron men mounted up in the Pumas. In addition to the Blades, the British were also taking with them a platoon of Paras from Task Force Maroon. The British Paras would be used to block off the area around Abu Atiyah's house, preventing either reinforcements arriving or people escaping. Americans from the 1st Battalion 502nd Infantry had also been assigned to support the operation as a QRF, Quick Reaction Force. The Pumas hit landing zone 1 just after 2 AM, and the 4 assault teams made their way across the few hundred meters to the assault point. Because of sectarian violence, local people were leaving booby traps and pressure pads to protect the neighborhoods. They had to move very carefully. Once safely in cover within yards of the house, 2 operators were sent forward to scout this southeast corner. They found an open door into the house and peered in. The team leader ordered the assault. One team moved swiftly past the parked car, entering the house through the door beside it. Just seconds later, gunfire rang out. 3 of the SAS team had been hit by someone in a corridor of the house. Contact! The call sign had taken casualties. Trauma packs were ripped open. One man ran onto the roof and started lobbing grenades at the SAS operators. The captain decided to resume the assault. Putting himself at the head of his men, Captain Ewan approached the building under covering fire. He and one of the blades lobbed in grenades. As they went in, 2 more were wounded. One by a bullet and the other by a grenade fragment. To those watching the events unfold on Kill TV back at Balad and in the MSS, the night vision image captured a squirter at the rear of the house. This insurgent was wearing a suicide vest. Members of Task Force Maroon were ordered to engage. The man swiftly took cover under a car. The captain's men killed one of the gunmen in the corridor and then began to go through the house room by room. Another man was shot. The SAS burst in to find half a dozen terrified women and children in the darkness. Once the rooms were clear, the assault force turned their attention to the building's roof, from which they had taken fire. One of the SAS NCOs, already wounded, told his comrades he would go up the stairs to clear the roof. Waiting for him, a man in a suicide vest. 5 of the defenders were dead, including 2 who had been wearing suicide vests. Working through the apostles as seasoned interpreters and able to conduct tactical questioning, the SAS quickly established that one of these survivors was Abu Atiyah. The soldiers moved through the house looking for intelligence. It was a shambles. Blood, spent bullet casings and broken glass, men lying dead. They recovered a great deal. Weapons, including 4 AK-47s, and one that seemed in the torchlight to be an M4, a 5.56 assault rifle usually used by coalition troops, and other possessions that might yield clues. Their mission had been accomplished. Al-Qaeda appeared to have raised their game. There were suicide bombers ready to go, ambushes set up for helicopters, and in some places houses rigged to explode. On the other side, Lieutenant General McChrystal's vision of a relentless cycle of missions, with each revolution producing the intel that could fuel the next, had now become a reality. Returning to the MSS after LARCHWOOD 4, members of B Squadron had 5 men wounded that night, but fortunately none so seriously that they would be absent from duty for long. It should come as no surprise that the OC of B Squadron was decorated for the tour. The captain mentioned earlier received a medal for his conduct on Operation LARCHWOOD 4, and many of the squadron's NCOs were decorated or received commendations too. More importantly, although they had experienced intense firefights and 11 men wounded during the tour, B Squadron returned home without losing a man. Tia and the other suspect were on their way to Balad for questioning. One thing already seemed clear to the members of B Squadron. The rifle they had captured looked suspiciously like one used by UKSF, and they were right. Subsequent analysis identified it as captured by AQI during an ill-fated SBS raid in 2003. Soon the product of Operation LARCHWOOD 4 was being processed at Balad, which produced some stunning discoveries. They found videos of al-Zarqawi.
تكبير! الله أكبر! والله لتهزمن أمريكا في العراق بسلاحها بعون الله تعالى. الله أكبر! الله أكبر!
At this time, the only photographs of the Jordanian jihadists in circulation were very old. Here was fresh footage. In one scene, in which Zarqawi sat inside a building talking politics, the gun leaning on the wall beside him was none other than the former SBS weapon captured by B Squadron. It was clear evidence that the SAS had got Zarqawi's prized possessions and that they had been very close to the man himself on April 16th. The American commanders were thrilled. This was jackpot. The intelligence picture was becoming clearer. Interrogators worked on captives like Abu Haidir. The Special Forces operators were living vampire hours. Raids go in at 3 a.m. The prisoners had been brought back in by 5 a.m. and everyone got their heads down by 9 a.m. In the afternoon they would start prepping the next operation, and then it would all start again the next day. On May 14th, intel had come in that al-Zarqawi might be holed up in Yusufia, southwest of Baghdad. and Delta Force's B Squadron commander ordered an immediate operation. Soon after they landed, the Delta men started to take fire from a nearby house.
Reloading! Second window, first floor!
What followed was a rapidly escalating battle in which at times the Al-Qaeda defenders of the area seemed to get the upper hand. The Delta soldiers came under small arms and mortar fire. 3 Al-Qaeda fighters, one wearing a suicide vest, jumped into a truck and tried to mount their own attack on the special operators. The vehicle was hit by a hail of bullets and the vest detonated. The helicopters that had dropped the Delta men circled, their door gunners using miniguns to fire thousands of rounds at the jihadists.
Multiple Tango buildings 2 and 4, I say again. Roger that, Bravo 1.
But the assault force commander did not have the option of getting the choppers to pick him up. The firefight was simply too heavy and the landing zone too narrow. The helicopters started taking fire from the ground. Al-Qaeda also used shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles against the Americans. One of these helicopters was shot down. Despite the attempts of the Americans to save the Little Bird crew, the 2 men inside died in the wreck. Delta succeeded in getting to its target and detaining 4 people. They brought in a Casevac, but it too came under heavy ground fire as it left. After hours of fighting, 2 dead and 5 wounded, several targets around their landing zone were hit with airstrikes. 3 other machines were forced to land due to serious damage from ground fire. The Americans said they had killed more than 25 terrorists. The battle was a bitter lesson for JSOC. The Delta Force B Squadron commander was relieved of his duties after the incident. The whiff of Zarqawi's presence in the area had allowed aggression to get the better of him in mounting a daylight raid inside a hornet's nest of opposition. Abu Haider was held at the screening facility. The interrogation team supervisor established a rapport with Abu Haider, flattering the prisoner and offering him an important role in the future of Iraq. It was around May 20th when Abu Haider finally revealed his bombshell that he was close to Sheikh al-Rahman, Zarqawi's religious advisor. Abu Haider knew where to find the Sheikh and something of the security routine he adopted when meeting his boss. Task Force Night operatives marked the Sheikh's location and surveillance got eyes on in Baghdad. They watched as he drove off in a small blue saloon on the afternoon of June 7th, 2006. The job was handed over to the Americans because they wanted the kill. A short way into his journey, Sheikh Rahman switched off his phone. But the Americans had eyes on anyway. The Sheikh was being tracked from a predator in the Joket Balad. The progress of his car was monitored. McChrystal himself was among the audience. The Sheikh drove to a remote farmhouse surrounded by date palm groves in Hibib, a village outside of Baguba. Reaching it in the early evening, a portly man in black appeared to greet Rahman.
Assalamu alaikum assalam. Wa alaikum assalam.
Those watching at Balad instantly recognized the figure from the video seized by the SAS. It was a portly stature al-Zarqawi. Immediately, one of the 2 F-16s orbiting in a stack nearby acted swiftly. The aircraft dropped 2 500-pound bombs onto the house.
The lead aircraft is going to engage it here momentarily with a 500-pound bomb on the target.
2 bombs dropped by an American F-16 strike home.
US troops from a regular unit nearby were the first on the scene. They recovered Zarqawi from the rubble, still breathing. They restrained him as he tried to get off the stretcher. He was soon dead. Sheikh Rahman, 2 women and 2 children were also killed by the American bombs. Zarqawi's body was flown back to Balad, where Lieutenant General McChrystal went to look at it. The soldier monk knew he had got his man at last. A sensitive site exploitation team went to work. Based on their intel, the Americans raided 17 places in Baghdad that very night, and the following day, the coalition announced its success to the world.
Al-Zarqawi has met his end, and this violent man will never murder again.
President Bush noted that he had rung McChrystal to congratulate him. This presidential reference marked the first implicit acknowledgement by an official source that the Pentagon's classified Black Joint Special Forces Operations Command was centrally engaged in Iraq. The task of implementing a burial plan eventually fell to special operators. The body was taken in the dead of night to a spot on the outskirts of Baghdad and dumped without ceremony in an unmarked grave. Huge thanks and reference to Mark Urban's book Task Force Black. Go and buy it, there's tons more. This is just a few chapters of that book. Thanks for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed that, consider joining the Hard Routine Cadre to support the channel. Every penny of the $2.99 membership is reinvested into the channel. Other ways to support the channel are by joining the Facebook group, link in the description, the Hard Routine community. Obviously subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, like and comment. So, as always, see you in the hills.